I do. I think it says waiting for Mark Brackett. It doesn't say we're live though. It says live. No, not yet. Oh, there we are. All right. Thanks, Kirill. Hello, everybody. We're going to get started in just a minute. We're going to let everybody get logged in, I guess. Thanks, Kirill. So, welcome, everybody. We're going to get started in just a moment. Hopefully, you'll be able to see everything. And in the meantime, what I'd love to know is where you're coming from. So, in the chat, maybe just share your name and you're here in the United States or you're in another country. Let's get the chat going. Cool. So I see we got friends from Perth. Welcome, Perth. We got Miami, Florida. We got London. We got Maryland, Houston, Texas. We got Nikki from Hawaii. We got people from North Carolina, New Hampshire. Cool. Australia, New Mexico, Philadelphia. Some people I just met last week, a couple days ago up in New Hampshire from the Radically Rural Conference. Welcome back. We got Adelaide. Hello, Adelaide, Australia. We got Thailand, San Diego, New Haven, where I work. We got Delaware. We got more New Haven. We got Milford, right next to where I work. Chicago, Baltimore, Calgary. Great. So we'll just give people another 30 seconds or so, and then we're going to jump into our conversation. As we're beginning, I'm assuming most of you have read part 1, which was your assignment. And so what's on your mind? What are the questions that you might have for me tonight? Because I want to make sure that tonight is fully interactive, right? Not just me being a professor. So make sure you get those questions coming as we go along. And just to set the stage, today is day 1. The focus of today is going to be on part 1 of the book. And then next week, we'll do part 2, which is all the ruler skills. We'll probably break that up into 2 days because there's a lot to cover on emotional intelligence. And then the last day, we'll probably focus on emotion regulation, which is, I saw some of the people who sent in questions had a lot of questions about. And then kind of just putting this all together, kind of setting action plans for how to use these skills in our lives. And with that said, we're going to jump right in. Most of you are familiar with the mood meter because you read the book, but I always feel like it's important for me to make sure everybody really understands it from, the scientific perspective. So we've got this tool that we call the mood meter, and you're going to see that on the screen in just a second. And on the x-axis, it says pleasantness. So all of you right now are feeling some degree of pleasantness. -5, you're like, ugh, I don't really want to be here. I'm being forced to be here. I'm doing this club with a friend and they just like push me to be here. +5 is like, I don't have words. Like, this is the most amazing moment of my life. I'm not expecting that's the case for you. Um, and Getting phone calls now in the middle of this, of course. Never have my ringer on, but when you do book clubs, things go awry. So pleasantness, -5, really kind of a not such a great day. -3, kind of everyday misery. 0, neutral. +3, highly pleasant. +5, this is really the most pleasant experience of your life. And on the X or the Y axis, we have energy. So energy is your physical energy, your mental energy. Think about, do you feel like falling asleep right now? Are you energized and you just don't know what to do with yourself? And then we create our 4 quadrants of the mood meter. We got yellow, red, blue, and green. So now's the time. We're going to skip what quadrant you're in, and we're going to jump right to your feeling word tonight. So for me, it's 7:05 p.m. Eastern time. Book club day 1. Kirill, who is my friend and colleague, is producing this with me. I'm very glad to have him on board. Feeling organized, prepared. We're doing all this new technology stuff. It's going to work. I'm in a pretty good place. So my word is I am hopeful, and I'm optimistic that this is going to be useful for all of you. All right. What's your words? Put them in the chat. We got to get going with these feeling words today. What word best describes your feeling right here, right now, tonight? We got some enthusiasm, mellow, curious, upbeat, hopeful. Gosh, this is going to be easy. Everybody's in a good place. Excited, at ease, content, anticipation. Okay. Thoughtful, calm, curious, relaxed, eager, attentive, interested. Not bad. A little morose. No problem. We'll be here for you. Hopeful, interested. Okay. Nice. So lots of feeling words. Interestingly, almost all the words are in the yellow. And so my hunch is that this book club is just like the best thing since apple pie. But, when you think about the question, hey, Kirill, can you come back on for a minute? You're on the spot. So if I were to say, hey, Kirill, how you feeling? What are you going to say? All right, cool. But, you know, in your daily life, what do you normally say? If someone says, hey, kiddo, most people probably don't even ask you how you're feeling. Am I right? Uh-huh. Uh-huh. All right. But in interpersonal stuff, like when you're walking around, you see somebody at a bar or at work, and someone says, how you feeling? What do you usually say? Fine. Interesting. Okay. Well, interesting point. And people are saying they really can't hear you that well. So whatever that means, we're going to skip you talking tonight. Anyhow, Um, Point is that, most of us, when we're interacting with people, we say fine, good, okay. And I really wanted to start off this club with a provocative question, which is that's your cheat sheet, Mood Meter. We'll go back to that. What's really involved in the question? How are you feeling? So please, everyone, take a moment. I want you to think about it from the perspective of the asker of the question and the perspective of the recipient of the question. So your little assignment right now is to get your thinking caps on and answer the question, what's really involved when we ask someone, how are you feeling? What comes to mind for you in terms of the challenges, with that question? Or what goes into giving an honest response? So someone's saying sincerity, the time, right? You know, right. If someone here were to ask me, hey Mark, how are you feeling? Right now, I'm annoyed that we can't hear Kadil, which would have been nice. I'm also excited to be here. I was getting nervous before this because I have two dogs who I put in my bedroom and they were barking like out of control. And I'm thinking like, if they don't stop barking during this book club, I'm going to lose it. Um, I mean, like we're all going through a lot. Somebody saying, social norms, wanting, whether or not we care, attention. Yeah, does a person feel seen? So you're all coming up with really good, examples there. And I'm just going to share with you, kind of the things that I've been thinking about. So first is, do I trust you? If I were to say to someone, you know, or someone to ask me how am I feeling, but I don't feel like I can trust them, probably not going to be open and authentic about how I'm feeling. I think one other just like simplest one is, do we even say the word feeling? How many of us, how's it going? What's up? We don't really ask that question. It may even be weird, right? For, a, you know, at work, right? I've gotten this question a lot like, Mark, am I supposed to ask the people that I work with, how are you feeling? That just feels like way too intimate. So it's sort of like, hey, how was your weekend? Fine, good, great. All right, I will have a great day. Um, we'll talk more about that later in terms of the like, how much time are we supposed to spend on this? Because a big criticism of the work right now, this field of emotional intelligence, is that there's a misperception that like someone like myself who teaches this is asking people to like all day long to just ask people how they're feeling. And I'm going to tell you right now up front, that is not the expectation. I don't want to think about my feelings all day long either, right? It would be like that would make us go nuts. How am I feeling about this? How am I feeling about that? Like crazy. All right, going back to this. Do we really want to hear the response? Um, we're going to learn and hear more about the research I've done in this space around when someone says, like, I'm feeling overwhelmed or anxious, are we the person who's receiving that information? Like, "Ooh, that means I got to stop everything. I can't go to work if I'm a parent. I got to stop my, you know, productivity in the workplace. Um, and so people are oftentimes, reluctant. Uh, the next is vocabulary. Do I have the vocabulary? Um, and related to the one I just shared is honestly, do I know what to do about it? Do I have the strategies? And I just bring this up at the beginning of our book club because, I've really thought a lot about this in terms of just a simple question, how are you feeling? It's a loaded question because of, what's going on for me, what's going on for the person I'm communicating with, our relationship, how trusting it is, etc. But hopefully things will change and we're going to get more comfortable with it and be more open and honest. Because one of the primary themes of this book club or of the work that we do at the Center for Emotional Intelligence is that there's no such thing as a bad emotion. So if I say I'm anxious, why do you make the assumption that that's negative? I've actually come to the conclusion that I like to work with people with moderate levels of anxiety. Think about it. They get stuff done. But even more so, if you think of anxiety in terms of what it is, which is, anticipating something that might be unpleasant in the future, right? The uncertainty of the future. If you have a little anxiety, you're going to be a really good planner for the future. So, when we're planning events, I want someone with a little bit of anxiety, right? They're going to really pay attention to the details because they're anticipating that things might go wrong, which is actually a good thing to do when you're planning a party or planning a big event like we do at the center. Does this resonate with people? That we need to move away from the assumption that unpleasant or bad emotions, that was my Freudian slip there, that unpleasant emotions are bad emotions, that we're going to just talk about emotions as experiences. And I think what matters most is that when we have emotions that are high intensity and long in duration, that's when we have to do something about it. How does that resonate with everybody? Just going to take a pause there. Yeah, someone's saying, that's how I use my anxiety planning. It's a good way to make your feelings productive. But we have a really weird conception of emotions in America, that there are good emotions like happy. That's why there's like 55 million books on happiness. And then that there are bad emotions like anxiety and stress and fear and anger. And that's why there's 55,000 books out there to help people deal with those emotions. When if we shifted our mindset about feelings, that they are not good or bad, they're just experiences, we might have a different relationship with them. All right. Any questions before we move forward? Questions about that? Any questions? What's on your mind? Yes, I love that expression. There's nothing either good or bad, but thinking that makes it so. Anybody have a question before we move forward? Well, always going to look at the chat in the box to see if I can answer any questions. One of the questions that people sent ahead of time was they just had a little bit of kind of confusion and they wanted me to clarify what is the difference between an emotion, a mood, a feeling, and dispositional affect. So I thought, why don't I cover that here? So I'm going to give you all a minute in the chat, and I'd love to hear from you. Like when you think about this, firstly, how do we define an emotion? I mean, it's kind of oftentimes people come to our center for trainings in schools in particular, and they say, oh, I can't wait to learn about emotional intelligence. This is so exciting. And then I say, so let's start off. Well, what's your definition of an emotion? And they're like, what do you mean? I'm like, we have to define it. If we're going to talk about being smart about it, what the heck is it? So, what is your definition of an emotion? Let's do it. I'll address that shame question a little bit. An emotion is an expression of feelings. I think the only way to know if an emotion is kind of fleeting, which is part of the definition of an emotion, or if it's more of a mental health condition or mental illness, is again checking in on that duration and that intensity. So let me give you my definition of an emotion. And hear me out on this because it's a little bit long and I have to see if I can remember my own definition. An emotion is a mostly short-lived response to a stimulus, kind of an automatic, short-lived response to a stimulus that causes shifts in the way we think, the way we feel in our bodies, and our motivation to behave a certain way. That is rooted in our entire development. Now, hear me out on that. An emotion is a mostly short-lived, automatic response to a stimulus that can be in our heads or in the world around us, because we wake up and we have thoughts that cause us to have emotions, or someone throws something at us in the street, we have an emotion. That causes shift when we feel emotions, right? We become, our thoughts start changing, like, what just happened there? Or like, I got to get out of here. We're motivated to behave a certain way. But all of that is based on our entire development. So, for example, growing up with a dad who had a lot of anger, my relationship to anger might be different than your relationship to anger. So, my experience of it and how I respond to it is baked in my development. This perspective is slightly different than things that you might read from earlier in psychology, which is that these are kind of inborn natural instincts. The argument in more current research is that there is some automaticity, but it's rooted or it's baked, in our life experiences. So every time I feel anger or sadness or happiness today, right, my brain is going back in my life and bringing in all those instances of anger or happiness. And that affects my experience of that emotion today. Oh, that's a lot. So let me pause there. Does that feel okay to people? That definition of an emotion? Let me look at the chat here. Yeah, that was Maggie. You got it down. But I want you to make sure that you got that piece about, from our life experiences, because, how I see anger and feel anger, is deeply based in how I saw it and felt it growing up. Okay, so that's an emotion. So a mood is different because it's a mood. And a mood is something that's longer but less intense. So, like, you're angry and then you become irritable, right? You wake up and, like, it's sunny outside, you got great ideas in your head. You're like, today's going to be a great day. You get to work and everybody's like, you're like, hey, and you're in a great mood. That's a mood. The emotion, right, is when, you get a gift. Oh, thank you. You're feeling happy. If that lingers, it becomes a mood. So less intense, also harder to define. Like, you're not sure where it comes from all the time. A feeling is more of your private, subjective experience. So, I'm not feeling like going to the movies tonight. I don't feel like talking to you very much. Oftentimes it comes out of an emotion, right? You're angry, and then you have feelings all about that. You're like, I don't like that person. I can't believe they spoke to me that way. I don't feel good about that. I don't feel good being around them. That's all the feeling aspects of our work. And then our dispositional affect is kind of where we live emotionally. So I tend to live, going back to the mood meter, in kind of the green or the red. I'm not usually like upbeat, like, let's go. I can't even fake it, right? It's weird for me. I'm not a yellow guy. I'm kind of calm, content, tranquil, peaceful, or I'm overwhelmed, anxious, stressed. I'm not really someone who's down or disappointed or feeling hopeless or despair. That's just me. And so that's good to know. Now, my big question for all of you right now is who cares? Why would I want to teach you or have you think about these four different kind of aspects of our emotional life? Why would it matter? Anybody? In the chat, I'm really curious. I'm just not a yellow guy. You know, I do things to bring me in the yellow more. I try to use humor in my presentations to get some yellow in the room. But, this is why I'm so anti these happiness books because some people, right, it's just an unrealistic expectation to think, oh my gosh, I got to wake up to be happy today. And here's what the research shows: when you value or overvalue feeling happy and strive to be that way, it backfires because you can't live up to the expectation. And then all of a sudden, you feel more disappointment or despair. Yeah, I really appreciate that, James, which is that this emotions are temporary, right? They're ephemeral. Um, but I think for me, the big point here is that we have to be aware of all of our affective states, right? I'm having an emotion and I got to go into a meeting. I got to regulate it if it's not going to be helpful for that meeting. I wake up in a good mood or a bad mood. I'm like, you know what? This is going to like leak into my work today. I better shift how I'm feeling. It's not going to be that helpful. I'm someone who lives in the green or in the red, and I'm about to give a presentation, and people don't want to be in the green or the red. I got to use some jokes and have some humor to get people into the yellow, or maybe I need people to reflect deeply because I want them to, think about all the challenges that one population might be having to have some empathy for them. Got to bring them into the blue. So, my point here is that the more self aware we are about our emotions, moods, and feelings, and our dispositional affect, the better able we're going to be to use all of our affective states wisely. All right, let's pause there. Any questions? Questions for any of this? What do you think? How's it going so far? Got to check in with my audience. We doing all right? Helpful information? Anything I can do to clarify it for you? All right. So that's kind of our emotion lexicon. Now, you might wonder, why does all this matter? And so in chapter 2 of the book, it's called Emotions Are Information. That's probably one of the most important chapters, not because it's so fantastic, but because it has 800 scholarly references to make the point. You know, someone in my position, I do a lot of public speaking, I do a lot of writing. There are a lot of naysayers out there. There are people who've written books over the last few years that are saying, this emotion stuff, like, stay away from it. Nobody should, it, the worst thing you could do is talk about your feelings or be emotionally self-aware, which is, it sounds crazy to me, to be honest. And so I thought it was really important in the book to show the data. And these are the 5 key areas that emotions are the driver of our attention, memory, and learning. Just think about it. If you're bored with my presentation right now, you're bored in this book club, you're already doing something else. That's boredom is a real emotion. right? The stimulation in front of you is not engaging. And so you decide, I'm doing that. Not the best if you're a math or science teacher, if your students are bored, right? Because we want to figure out, right, how to create the engagement so they learn the content. But again, boredom, not a bad emotion. Sometimes I'm my most creative when I'm bored. I'm sitting in a room or I'm at a lecture and it's like, ugh. And all of a sudden my brain just goes, all right, now, Mark, you could do this so much better. What would you do that would be more creative than this person? What do you want to avoid doing in your next presentation? Point is that we're not going to judge the feeling. We're going to ask ourselves, is this emotion helpful to achieving my goals? And so in general, when we're feeling strong emotions, they can interfere with learning, with decision making, with relationship quality, with physical and mental health. But here's the kicker. It's not the feeling so much as it is us being unaware that we're having the feeling and unable to regulate it. So pause there for a minute. Right. There's no reason why we can't be angry and productive or overwhelmed or sad and get our work done. There's somehow or another this belief in our society that all these red and blue emotions on the mood meter are these bad emotions that make us unable to work or unproductive. I don't believe that. I think it has to do with the fact that we're not taught to appreciate these emotions, understand where they're coming from, ask ourselves good questions like scientists, and then apply strategies to either stay in the feeling or shift the feeling to achieve our goals. Now, that was a lot. So just absorb that for a minute. That it's not the emotion, it's that we're oftentimes unaware of our feelings. We're unaware of how our feelings are being expressed in the world around us because we're not that trained in how to regulate them. And therefore, people see them as you're emotional, right? That's bad, as opposed to learning about emotions, understanding them deeply, and building this space between being activated and your reaction to regulate it effectively so that you can pay more attention, make a good decision, build and maintain healthy relationships, support your physical and mental health, and achieve your goals. So let me pause there. Thoughts about this? I'm looking at the chat now. Yeah, we all are living on a roller coaster ride. And again, we just have this thing that these unpleasant feelings are, getting in the way. They're only getting in the way because we are not using them wisely. We're not emotionally intelligent about our emotional life. Yeah, one important question here is about culture. And this is why I said that how we feel, going back earlier, is rooted in our lived experience, because culture does play a very important role in our understanding of emotion. So, for example, in certain cultures, emotions are what we call hypercognized. Like in Chinese, there are well over 50, maybe 100 words for the shame family. In English, we don't have that. We have I'm sorry, I feel shame, I feel ashamed, or I feel guilty, remorse. Maybe we have 5, 10 max. Whereas in Chinese, there's 100. So you can imagine if we start using terms like emotional granularity, that the granularity of people in China around the concept of shame is going to be far greater than the granularity of people here in the United States. So culture plays a very big role. I would say that culture plays one of the biggest roles in our expression, right? Whether or not we decide to talk about it. That the experience of emotions, a lot of universality and a lot of universality there. But whether or not we feel comfortable, like Kirill, who is behind the scenes today, is from Russia, right? The rules in Russia about how you speak about emotions, whether it be with other men or with your family or in public, are probably different than the rules, let's say, in New York City, where I'm at right now. I'm looking at the chat just for a moment. Okay. So, any questions about chapter 2? We could spend the entire book club going through chapter 2, but I don't want to do that because you can read it, and there's lots of rich information in there about creativity, how our emotions drive or not our attention. But my big message to all of you is that our emotions don't cause us to behave a certain way. It's having emotions and a lack of self-awareness and a lack of skill in dealing with our emotions that causes us to behave a certain way. Do you see the difference there? Does that resonate with people? Someone's asking about memory. Emotions are linked to memory. So, for example, in our school-based work, we intentionally do emotion, we call it mood congruent teaching or mood congruent learning. That if, for example, you're doing a lesson about the Holocaust or about slavery or something where there's a lot of pain, we want to get our students to kind of empathize and understand the emotion of the people who are experiencing it, because that will help them remember the content better. It activates more areas of your brain that support the remembering of the material. All right. Any other questions before we move forward? Because we have one more big idea and we've got about 20 minutes to do it today. Okay, everybody. Well, this is going well, I think. So compartmentalizing is tricky, just to jump to the strategies. And we can talk about this later. But, when you compartmentalize, it's saying, the best example I have of that is a tough one. It was when I was about to give, my father had passed away, and his funeral was, I don't remember the day, but let's say it was on a Friday. He died on a Wednesday or Tuesday, and I had to give a speech on Thursday. And honestly, it was not easy. And nor did I think I should probably do it. I went through this whole thing in my head. Of course, my father would be like, go do your speech. I ended up doing the speech. Now, of course, I was feeling a lot of grief because I had just lost my dad. But what I was able to do, thankfully, because I have learned skills, was I just kind of parked my grief and my sadness, over here. And I just talked to myself and I would say, Mark, right, the show must go on. You can't cancel this. You're the only presenter at this conference. They're waiting for you, thousands of people. So, can you, just park the grief aside? What do you need to do that? So I asked my two brothers to come with me so I could have their social support in the audience, which is lovely. I was able to just go into my mode of presenter mode, do my talk, and then, of course, went home and was able to go back, to, living the grief. But that's, that takes practice. It's not something you can just tell someone to do. It takes a kind of learning of the concept, practicing it, seeing what other because compartmentalizing and just isn't just compartmentalizing, right? It is a very specific strategy that oftentimes, if done too often, can lead to denial or suppression, which we don't want to do, right? We're not denying the grief. What we're doing is we're saying, right now I have to achieve this goal, so I'm going to just park the grief over here for now. I'm not going to forget about it. I'm going to come back to it. One other question that I saw that someone sent to me, and I see it here again, is this idea like that we are sending signals, right? That's the relationship piece. Emotions are signals. They send signals, right? From the inside. Like if you wake up feeling kind of tired and, a little hopeless because maybe you just don't have a lot of purpose that day, it is a signal, right? You don't want to approach people generally. You want to stay away. The same applies to when you're walking into I gave a speech once to this group of people who were not wanting to listen to me. And I walked into the room and everybody it almost looked like I had walked into like a weird movie of people who hated me. And I'm thinking to myself, like, what's the signal here, Mark? Run away. So, right, that's a signal. Facial expressions, body language, vocal tone, all send signals to us to approach or avoid. Now, it's tricky because our emotions can mess with us. So I can never achieve my goals because of the fear that I have. And this is where we have to become scientists about our feelings. We've got to ask ourselves, is how I'm feeling, is how I'm dealing with my feeling helping me to move forward, to achieve my goal? Am I getting the support I need, whether it's the counseling, the social support, the cognitive strategies to help me deal with that emotion? That's important. Now, I want to just be, it is difficult, right? For people who have chronic depression, for example, because they are sending signals out to people, that, this person, is a certain way. Now, of course, as a person, if you're in love with this person as a partner or as a parent, all emotions are signals to approach. I'm going to say that again. In close relationships, no matter what the emotion is, it's approach. Unless, of course, you're being gaslighted or manipulated, or hurt by someone. But this is a tough one because if we're parents or when our partner's angry with us, we tend to want to run away. We don't want to deal with it. But the signal really is, I'm hurting. I need your love. I need your support. Sorry. This is, this is life. Well, it's not judging the emotion per se. It's asking ourselves questions about the helpfulness or unhelpfulness of the feeling. And I think there's a difference there in terms of I'm not saying that I don't ever want to feel the feeling. What I'm saying is that right now, that feeling is not going to help me be productive. So, for example, going back to my father and that presentation, when I'm feeling that grief, right, showing up on a stage with 2,000 people, I had to do a little bit of faking it until you make it, right? I had to put the grief over here and put myself into that mode of like, Mark, your job is to be that show person. You're going to bring people on an emotional roller coaster ride. Get out there, Mark, and do it. You can do this. In honor of your father, go. And I did work myself I regulated myself into a more pleasant place. Of course, deep inside, I'm still feeling the feeling. I'm not wanting to get rid of it. I'm just saying it's not working for me in this moment. I need a different feeling to achieve a goal. And so we just have to be aware, it is a thin line, that nuance of non-judgmental awareness. But just because I am being non-judgmental, or just using that, doesn't mean that I don't want to shift the feeling. Okay, is that clear? I want to make sure that's clear, because it's not that simple. It's nuanced. Somebody's saying this is going too deep for chapters 1 and 2. It's okay. We can go there. I appreciate that, though. Well, this is, I think, really interesting, and I love, these questions. So please don't stop asking them, because, the better I can communicate it, the more helpful it can be, and also the more I can learn, because I'm not here to just be the teacher. I want to hear from all of you and learn from you. Okay, so the title of the book club is Permission to Feel. And for those of you who have read, you know a little bit about my story, because I opened the book, with my story. And I want to say something, important about that, because I often think that my story, which I try to keep short because I didn't want it to be about me, can be an interference, because it's an extreme story of a child who was abused. But my hunch is that everyone here has a story. Everyone has a story. Some of our stories sadly involve abuse, like mine, but some of them may involve neglect, or some of them may involve growing up with a toxically positive parent, or as I grew up with a toxically masculine parent. My belief, and the data, which I'm going to show you in a minute, is that just most of us didn't learn much about emotions growing up at home or at school. So I feel like it's like ground zero for like understanding about our emotions. And so in my book, I wrote about my Uncle Marvin, who was the person who gave me permission to feel. He was the person I felt safe and comfortable with talking about my emotions. And I hadn't done research on that. That was just a title of a book based on my experience. But since writing the book, I've now studied tens of thousands of people, including 500 and something of all of you who filled out the survey. And I've asked you that question. Did you have an Uncle Marvin? And I'm going to compare your results with our national study. But that's going to come next. First, just thought you want to see the bar graphs about how much did you learn about emotions at home and at school. Bupkis, that's what you learned. People just don't learn about this stuff. It's just not part of our environment. It's not part of our education system. How many of your parents went for emotional intelligence parenting, a course on emotionally intelligent parenting before they decided to have you? Just in the box, how many of you believe that your parents went to the school of emotionally intelligent parenting? Anyone? What would be your automatic response to that? I'm going to pause for a minute and just see what you guys say. Negatory. Nope, zero. Definitely not my parents. It doesn't mean your parents weren't good people, right? I'm sounding judgmental. It's not about that. It's just factual. Emotional intelligence wasn't even in our lexicon until 1990. And so, just people weren't thinking about it. Some people, of course, had people raise them that understood these concepts, but most people didn't. So I asked you in the research, Did you have a feelings mentor, an Uncle Marvin, when you were growing up? And here are the results. So my large sample of around 10,000 people, 40% said yes, 60% said no. This group of about 520 people who completed the survey, 20% said yes, 80% said no. Gosh, maybe that's part of your motivation, right? Is to learn more about this. But I find it quite interesting, that only 20% of over 500 people who are coming to a book club on emotional intelligence said that growing up, that they had someone with whom they could talk about their emotions. 80% of us didn't. And yes, so it is a self-selected sample, but that's a good thing because I like self-selected samples for book clubs because it's people who are motivated and who want to learn about these things and make a difference in their own lives and other people's lives. And so for me, the research has gotten to be more elaborate. And I've asked people to describe their Uncle Marvin. So I say to people, if you had the Uncle Marvin, how would you describe them? And if you didn't have one, maybe you've seen one around, and what do you think the characteristics are of that Uncle Marvin? So everyone, I'm curious, in the chat, what are your top 3 attributes? What do you think the top 3 are in the research? Caring, safe. Keep going, top 3. Mr. Rogers. You got to describe Mr. Rogers. What are his attributes? Non-judgmental, caring, active, generous, kind, non-judgmental. Nice words there. So I'm going to show you the national data and then your data, and you're going to see why I have to write another book about this. So the US large sample, 10,000 people, top 3, good listener, empathetic or empathic, non-judgmental. Top 3. All right. And the survey of all of you says empathetic or empathic, good listening, non-judgmental. I mean, I have done this study over 50 times. I've done it here with you. I've done it with national samples. I've done it with educators. I've done it with people in the workforce. I just was over in Hong Kong. I was in Costa Rica, Australia, Italy, Spain. Everywhere I go, the top 3 characteristics: empathic, good listening, non-judgmental. So my question to all of you is, why? Why these 3? What do you think? Why did these 3 show up over all other attributes as being the most important? What do you think? They make you feel safe. I see someone wrote. Kind of lets you be open up. The 3 things I failed the hardest. I know we all fail at this. I try. Ugh. Validation makes you feel safe. Makes you be vulnerable. It's lacking in our lives. Trust, authenticity. Nice. Really good point you're making. So here's the big one for tonight, and I think we're going to wrap on this one. which is what's getting in the way? What needs to happen in our society to make sure that it's not 20% of us that have someone when we're growing up that gives us permission to feel? What's going to help us get that number to 80%, 90%, or 100%? So what's going to get in the way, or what is getting in the way, and what can we do about that? And I'm going to take myself, I'm going to let you see all of me. All right, you get the full picture now. So what do you think? What's the big takeaway today? What's it going to take? Education, time to pause and talk, awareness, school. The focus on productivity gets in the way. Good point. What else comes to mind? And it's an interesting point, and I want to really emphasize it. Did you see in that Wordle of all those concepts, top 3, non-judgmental, good listening, and empathy, compassion? Do you see it nowhere did anyone say fixer, problem solver, brilliant, high SAT scores, amazing grade point averages? Nowhere. And I just find that really interesting, that the people that we want to be around, the people that help us develop, are the people who approach us with a non-judgmental attitude, who listen to what we have to say, and who care. It's kind of simple. And so all these barriers, the fear, the time, right? By the way, metabolically speaking, it's a lot harder to be judgmental. You got to think about it, and you got to really kind of like, why would you do that? And it's effortful to be judgmental. It's freeing to be non-judgmental. Listening is effortful. It's a little bit more effortful because you actually have to not think about what your response is going to be, not try to listen to solve, but just listen for listening's sake. But it's possible. So what are our solutions here? People just don't have the education. We need government support. Gosh, we know that. The judgment piece. So I'm going to end today with 2 things. The top 2 that I find in my research are fear and time. And some of you who have heard me speak before may have heard this, but I was giving a speech a while back, and a mom had an epiphany. And she said, I've realized I have 2 children, and one of them has an Uncle Marvin, and one of them doesn't. And the one that doesn't, Mark, you have motivated me. I am motivated. I am leaving here today, and I'm going to find my son his Uncle Marvin. I said, lady, it could be you. It was a little, I couldn't help myself. But it was like, it kind of just washed by her. It did not come to her that like, oh, I could be the non-judgmental, listening, caring person. So that's my take-home message for all of you today. It's twofold. One is, you can be your own Uncle Marvin. So even if you are in that 20% or 80% that didn't have one, it's never too late to be your own Uncle Marvin. Right? We can start as adults just being a little less judgmental of ourselves, being better listeners, and having some self-compassion. And here's another interesting thing, and this is based in science, that when we attempt to be the Uncle Marvin or Aunt Maria for other people, when we're out there helping other people have permission to feel. We observe the benefits in them. And when we observe other people experiencing the benefits of our generosity, it makes us feel better. So start with yourself, give a little to other people, and guess what? It's actually, beneficial for yourself. And that's going to be the end for tonight. So I'm going to ask everyone to just pause. Take a nice long inhale. I'm going to ask you to set a goal for tonight. So we're here together. Non-judgmental, good listener, empathic, compassionate. Which one are you going to work on? What's going to be your strategy, your technique? And on that note, the dogs are excited that this is coming to an end. It's time for dinner. Everyone, have an amazing week, and I'll see you next week.